In my last video, I talked about how bad the series is looking for the main characters, how basically the antagonists are taking the show. It looks like they're going to win, but they haven't won yet. There is one person left who stands as the final wall. Now, whether you think that this final wall will be successful or not, who knows, but that's what today's video is about. We know that there are 4 special grade sorcerers in the modern era. Gojo is now sealed in a box, Geto turned into Kenjaku, and Yuki just recently died in a fight against Kenjaku. The only special grade sorcerer left is Yuta Okkotsu. He is Jujutsu Kaisen's last hope. But before we get into the video, I want to say if you enjoy JJK content, then I would really appreciate it if you would leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel, as I do post every other day on different topics you guys give me and a few I'll come up with on my own. Now let's get into the video. Now there is one big reason why we need a character like Yuta to come in and save the main cast. And this one big reason is something I've talked about a couple of times on my channel, but it will be one of the highlights of today's video. And that reason is the power curve that hit JJK around midway through the series. We knew that back in Goodwill that it seemed like when we had new sorcerers come around, they could all compete. You know, Kamo, Todo, Maki even when she had Playful Cloud in her hand, and Megami. There was so many other sorcerers like Inumaki as well, and Panda, and also Mekamaru who could do something. It felt like everybody could join a fight, and it seemed like all of these sorcerers were powerful for the time being. But the problem was when Shibuya rolled around, a massive power curve hit the series. And Yuta even coming back at the time he did further reinforces this power curve that happened, because Yuta didn't come around until recently. And the reason for that is, there was no reason for Yuta to be around. Now yes, Yuta was overseas training, but there is a reason Gege took a while for Yuta to come back during the height of the Shibuya incident, and that is because he needed to be, because this power curve hit the series. Before this, all of the sorcerers could compete with each other. But now with the appearance of stronger characters, you know, like Ryu, Uro, Kashimo, even the development of the disaster curses, for example, we knew that Mahito would grow stronger as the series progressed. We just needed stronger sorcerers to come along. And it seemed like the progression of the main cast wasn't fast enough. And this is the dilemma that Gege was in, and the problem that most mangaka come across when it comes time to introduce new antagonists is, you want the main cast to be strong. Like as readers, we all want the main cast to be able to compete, but at the same time, we don't want them to receive a power upgrade that doesn't make sense. The perfect example for what I mean is, we all love Nanami, for example. We all wanted Nanami to stay around, but if Nanami just gained a random power upgrade that made him as strong as Yuki, for example, it would have been bad writing. So Gege's in sort of this dilemma where, yes, you want to make the readers happy, we want our main characters to succeed, but we don't want Nanami to just receive a random upgrade that doesn't make sense to where he's now on the level of a special grade. And that is why characters like Yuta Okkotsu exist and came back into the series. So the question is, can Yuta do it by himself? And if not, who is there to help him? Now, one of the first couple people you might think about when I ask that is, well, there are characters like Maki and Hikari that can help Yuta. But we'll talk about them a bit later, because the focus right now is Yuta, because there's this narrative being built up, this fight that should be happening between him and Kenjaku. You know, where that stance Yuta takes where he says he will be the one to exercise Kenjaku and gain the points? Well, that is the fight we're honestly going to end up getting. And now we're seeing the new activity of Arame and Sukuna, so now would be a good time to look at Yuta Okkotsu's strength so we can get a gauge of how strong he actually is. Now, Volume 0 stuff for Yuta is a bit outdated now, as Rika is different and Yuta was a beginner sorcerer, but there are just bits and pieces of information that are useful that we learned from Volume 0. And the first piece of information we learn is that Rika is supposed to be the cursed spirit of an endless amount of cursed energy. And this is something that just stays consistent even when Rika comes back in this new form, as she always gives Yuta this supply of a large amount of cursed energy. But one thing that we learn is that Yuta already has a large supply of cursed energy on his own. We learned in the fight with Yuji that Yuta says that he has more cursed energy than Gojo himself. And we also have this statement from Ryu while he's fighting Yuta on the rooftop that every time Ryu is punching against Yuta, he feels like he's knocking against a massive water tank. And this statement is very important because Ryu says this before Yuta ever even summons Rika. So before even having Rika there with him, Ryu felt like he was punching a water tank of cursed energy, when in reality, he was just punching Yuta. Remember how I said that Yuta told Yuji he has more curse energy than Gojo? One of the funnier things about that is that when Yuji first sensed Yuta, like before he even saw Yuta with his own eyes, just from feeling Yuta's curse energy, Yuji thought that he was sensing Gojo. But then he said, and Yuji's exact words are, "Is this Gojo sensei? No, something even creepier." So it's just crazy how upon sensing Yuta's presence and curse energy, he literally thought he was in the presence of someone as powerful as Gojo. And not only that, he said that Yuta's curse energy was even creepier. Now you can take Yuji saying creepier as what you want. I'm not saying that it means creepier equals stronger. It's just something important to take note of. And it's insane how even though Kenjaku knows this, he doesn't buy into the hype. Remember when Gojo was getting sealed by Kenjaku? Gojo says to him, "You don't remember, before that body was killed by me, remember who beat it up." And then Kenjaku says, "Yuta Akotsu, huh? I don't really get what everyone sees in him. His ability to copy curse techniques and his boundless curse energy. Both are the result of him having to detain his loved one's soul. Sorry to say, but Yuta Akotsu can't become the next Satoru Gojo." It's just insane how even after recognizing that Yuta can copy curse techniques and saying that Yuta has boundless curse energy, he still isn't impressed. Now we do know that Kenjaku is extremely strong himself, but it's just a bit insane that he's not impressed by boundless curse energy and the ability to copy curse techniques. Now we're about to get into something very interesting, and I can't wait to talk about this. In the past, I made a video talking about who would win in a fight between Yuta and Kenjaku, and in that video, I had Kenjaku win the fight. But there is something much different here, because in this video, we're talking about the end of the series and a potential future fight with Kenjaku. But in that versus battle, I was taking the state of both fighters and the last time we saw them fight. So what I mean by this is, in that Yuta vs Kenjaku video, I had Yuta back from his fight with Ryu and Uro, and I had Kenjaku from his fight with Yuki. We're talking about a potential future Yuta versus a future Kenjaku. And there is one element that Yuta has that is going to be very important when it comes to saving the Jujutsu world, and that is his rate of growth. There is something that Yuta has that can be expanded upon, and we get an insight on this after he gets done fighting Ryu and they're sitting down talking. At the end of their fight after Yuta beats Ryu, Ryu looks over at Yuta and says, "You're reaching your limit. I've seen it. What surpasses the horizon of sorcerers, cursed spirits, and strong fighters is overwhelming aggression that disregards all else, like a calamity. You're too soft, Akotsu, and I ain't praising you, that there's no benefit to sparing an opponent's life." So we see that here Ryu is saying Yuta is too compassionate. If he could just get into this mindset where he disregards everybody else, he would actually grow as a sorcerer. But there's one thing here that Ryu was wrong about, but before I say what it is, I want to visit what Sukuna says on this matter before I come back to this so it all ties in together. Remember back when Sukuna was fighting Jogo? Well, right before he burned him, he said to Jogo, "So you wanted to become human." Humans flocking together, curses flocking together, comparing themselves to those around them, leads to weakness and stunts their growth. You should have burnt everything you desire to a cinder, to reach the heights of Satoru Gojo and not worry about your future or identity, but you lack the hunger to take hold of your desires. So Sukuna is just reinforcing back what Ryu said, that in order to reach the greatest heights, you need to be extremely selfish and disregard everybody and everything around you. So let's take a look back at what Ryu said. He said that Yuta was reaching his limit, and his main reason for this was because Yuta spared his life. But Ryu quickly just takes his words back, where as soon as Yuta asks for his points, Ryu says, "Oh, I see. You only didn't kill us because you needed our points," to which Yuta says, "Yeah, well, maybe." So even though the essence of what Ryu was saying is correct and that you do need to disregard everybody else, he was wrong in applying this to Yuta and saying that Yuta was reaching his limit, because he thought that Yuta just spared his life to just spare his life. But Ryu quickly realizes that the only reason Yuta spared his life is because Yuta needed his points for the Culling Games. So I will say this, yes, you do need to be selfish to reach the heights. I do think that Ryu and Sukuna are right about this, but Ryu was just wrong in prescribing this to Yuta and saying that Yuta was reaching his limit, because Ryu didn't actually know the reason why Yuta let him live. Yuta very well may have just killed him if he didn't need his points. Now, one thing that Yuta has that is specific to him is the way he grows as a sorcerer. You know that sorcerers can either get better at controlling their curse energy, they can even gain more curse energy, or just become better combatants. But Yuta has something on top of this that other sorcerers don't, and that is that Yuta can use multiple different curse techniques. Now this means that Yuta can grow in all of the other ways that other sorcerers do as well, but he can also take their curse techniques and use them for himself. An example of this is a cursed speech that we see used in Volume 0 and we see it used against Uro in his fight, is that this makes him super versatile. You don't know exactly what you're getting into when you fight Yuta. It's like you know that you're fighting a bunch of different curse techniques, but you don't know what he's copied by the time he comes up to fight you. And unless Kenjaku has eyes everywhere, he doesn't know what all Yuta has been copying, and he doesn't know what Yuta will copy before he comes to fight him in the future. So, remember when I said Kenjaku called Yuta just a bunch of hype? At that point, Yuta did not have Drew Shikigami technique, he also didn't have Uro's skybending technique, but now he has both of those, and he probably will gain more before he goes to fight Kenjaku. There is only one downside you could say for Yuta in using all of these different curse techniques, and that his connection with Rika only lasts for 5 minutes now. We know that back in Volume 0, he just had Rika, like that was just something that was there, but now with this new form of Rika, whenever he summons her, she only stays around for 5 minutes. So we know that that amount of time from the beginning of his fight with Ryu and Uro to the end, Yuta actually ran out. So this is something that if Yuta does end up fighting Kenjaku, he would have to watch out for, is that fight would have to take less time than it did against Ryu and Uro, because if that fight takes just as much time or even more, he would have to end off the fight without Rika by his side. And one thing I haven't covered yet but we are all wondering about is what is Yuta's domain expansion. If you look at everybody else's domain, it usually is just an extension of their curse technique. For example, Gojo has the infinity. Whenever he traps you in his domain, you just get hit with an infinite amount of information. If you look at Jogo, he fights with lava and craters, and his domain is the same way. Mahito as well, whenever you get hit with his domain, you get hit by Idol Transfiguration, which is his curse technique. But if we look at Yuta, what in the world could his domain be? If his curse technique is copying curse techniques, and that would have to mean when he traps you in his domain, he would be copying something off of you in some way. We don't know what it is, but I know that whatever it is, it will be epic and will be super useful and important in a fight against Kenjaku. Also, the reason I keep singling out Kenjaku is because who else is there for him to fight? I think that Sukuna will be reserved for Kashimo and Gojo. Remember, Kashimo has it out for Sukuna. He wants to fight him and uses his curse technique on him. And then we know that fight that's being built up with Gojo and Sukuna. So I don't think that Yuta is the fight for Sukuna. I think that is reserved for those two. So the only person left, the only in-game villain, is Kenjaku. Yuta's already fought Ryu and Uro. Kashimo is now turned into sort of an ally with Hikari. You know, Kashimo just wants to fight Sukuna, so there's no other in-game villains left to fight other than Kenjaku. Also, for the people wondering what about Hikari and Maki, I did say that I would talk about them around this point in the video, and I honestly don't think that they will be there to help Yuta in his fight against Kenjaku. I think the narrative being built up is that it will be a 1 versus 1. It's sort of the run back, the rematch that happened in Volume 0, like a special grade versus special grade battle for only those two and those two alone. And remember when I said Yuta has a large amount of curse energy on his own, even without Rika? This is even further backed up back when Yuta beat the cockroach. Uro and Ryu were actually observing this, and they say his output isn't all that, but what's surprising is his overall curse energy. It's bottomless. So it's just insane how even on his own, Yuta has this bottomless curse energy that they say. And this is without Rika even being there. With Rika there, you can sort of look at her as like a charger, for example. Yuta can run out of curse energy, which he starts to when he begins using reverse curse technique throughout the fight. But when Rika comes back, she's like a charger. If you look at it sort of like a phone and a charger, Rika comes back and begins to charge Yuta back up to 100%. So it's like Rika is the thing that is there to keep Yuta at full curse energy amount. Also, we know that Yuta uses reverse curse technique whenever he takes big hits during a fight. Ryu says it himself that every time Yuta was taking a big hit within his fight with him and Uro, he always used reverse curse technique to heal himself. So we know that in battles, which are against strong opponents, he always heals himself in order to stay at 100%. I don't know what will happen in the future of the series, but I do know that this fight between him and Kenjaku probably will happen, and no matter what the outcome is, I know it will be epic. Because I've said this before, Gege always delivers whenever it comes to fights that we want to see. Remember Yuji and Todo versus Mahito? That fight was epic. Kashimo versus Hikari was epic. So was Yuta versus Ryu and Uro. And in the most recent chapters, we saw Kenjaku versus Yuki, which was epic as well, even Sukuna versus Yorozu. So, no matter what happens between Kenjaku and Yuta, I know we all can't wait to see it. And in every other video that I've ever made like this, I always give an answer. I always say, oh yes, this character will win, or this is what I think will happen for sure. But for this video, I'm going to be doing something different. I'm going to leave it up to you guys. Do you think that Yuta on his own will be enough to take down Kenjaku and be enough to beat the final antagonist? Or do you think that Yuta will need help from other characters like Maki and Hikari? And if so, do you think that Maki and Hikari will be enough for Yuta to defeat Kenjaku? Because yeah, Yuta is strong, after all, he is special grade. But asking him to take down a whale like Kenjaku on his own is a big thing to ask for. And whether he'll be able to do it or not, we can only wait and see. With that being said, I want to thank you so much for reaching the end of the video. And if you enjoyed, then I would really appreciate it if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel, as I do post every other day on different topics you guys give me and a few I'll come up with on my own. Thank you for watching. See you next time.